This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. All right, so if last week was the least enjoyable game to rewatch of the season, or at least I'm anticipating that being the least enjoyable game to rewatch in the season, this was the most interesting game to rewatch in the season, because we talk about it all the time that the Browns beat the 49ers with PJ Walker. But when you think of that idea of the team of the Browns beating the 49ers with PJ Walker, you imagine a scenario where the 49ers don't play that well. The Browns are playing clean, crisp football, and that's how the Browns sneak one by the 49ers. But that's not how this game happened at all. The Browns played pretty bad football on the offensive end in the first quarter. And I would argue pretty sloppy football throughout. I mean, they had two interceptions. They had put themselves in a bad position. You can make the case that even if the Browns had starters, you would argue that this would be a difficult game for the Browns to win. And again, it just shows you the strength of the Cleveland Browns defense that they were able to win this game, because this did not fit the archetype of a game of underdog team wins because they're playing scrappy while the other team's making mistakes. I would argue that the San Francisco 49ers either made a similar amount of mistakes or less mistakes than the Cleveland Browns did in this game. It's just fascinating that they were able to win this one. PJ Walker throws what looks like a very familiar interception. I don't know how many interceptions the Browns threw off this stick play on this comeback route specifically, but they've thrown like one, two, three, four, I think four, and two of them were pick sixes, if not three of them were pick sixes. They were, and look, I made that video about this is why Alex Van Pelt, not Scott Van Pelt, not the SportsCenter guy, Alex Van Pelt got fired. And a lot of people in the comment section were kind of confused on why it would get Alex Van Pelt fired, and maybe they were Patriots fans trying to ride for their new offensive coordinator. But the reason I made that connection is not because of the play being called. It's stick. Every NFL team calls stick. The issue is that the play was so dependent, and the way that the play was designed is so dependent on if you get to your spot at the right time, and if that quarterback gets rid of the ball at the right time, that it becomes pretty easy to hop. And I think that was one of the biggest problems that the Browns offense had, was just the overall design of it was not creative enough to kind of avoid people knowing exactly what to do once they recognize these concepts. And it turned into interceptions all the time on this team. So this PJ Walker interception happens. The Browns defense goes nuts here. They go on a negative 10-yard stand on this set, which turns a 44-yard field goal into a 54-yard field goal. And that 54-yard field goal attempt gets missed by San Francisco's kicker. And that's a huge part. That's a huge part of this game, because San Francisco started this game. They scored a touchdown. If they would have scored on that ensuing possession and either went up 10-0, which would have been very tough for this team to come back from, or 14-0, the game could have been over right then, right there. It could have been all wraps in all caps for this team. But they made that huge defensive stand, forced a difficult field goal, and bam, they're right back in this. Now, something I did notice with Jerome Ford, and look, Jerome Ford has some big runs later on in this game. They got to address his lack of lateral flexibility. It just seems like he can't move side to side well in tight spaces. And this is a clip that kind of shows that. Also, the Browns were played with silly penalties, and Wyatt Teller was bad in this game for the most part. He gets this silly penalty on what should have been a touchdown. And this hurts because the Browns missed the ensuing field goal that they get out of this drive. And you don't get a touchdown when points are obviously at a premium in this game, all because Wyatt Teller held for virtually no reason, really, on a screenplay. It just didn't make any sense, and he makes multiple mistakes like that early in the season. Jed Wills, on the other hand, I thought he played a pretty solid game. If you go on PFF, it's ranked as one of his highest games. Now, again, shouldn't just go straight off the PFF grade, but if you look at the tape on this one, I think Jed Wills does do a good job holding up relatively well versus Nick Bosa. So you got to give credit where credit is due for Jed there. This goes back to my point. This comment from the commentary team, I think it's Greg Olson that says this, but this just tells you like how bad the Browns were playing in the first quarter and like how it just seemed like this was a game that the Browns can't win in this kind of a situation.
Can't have it against an unbeaten team.
Yeah, we came into the show, at the top of the broadcast.
Has hooked a field goal, and the Browns certainly makeable 47-yard field goal. Can't have it against an unbeaten team.
Yeah, we came into the show, at the top of the broadcast talking about, all right, what is the formula? It's not an easy path for no team, let alone a team playing their third quarterback of the year and trying to find their identity on offense. But as you said, they've done some good things, but it's been the defensive penalties. It's been an early turnover, a penalty that negates a touchdown, and now a missed field goal. I mean, that is the exact opposite of how you pull off what a lot of people consider being an upset, and just leaving a lot on the table.
Browns defense came out of this, and they just like the Browns defense deserves so much more credit than they get, and they already get a ton of credit. Just the pressure and the defensive line in this one were just dominant, right? Because there were a couple of times where the back end coverage really didn't hold up that well, but because the pressure from the defensive line was so extreme, they were just able to force bad throws out of Brock Purdy, and that was just as good coverage on the back end. Just that's what a great defensive line does for you. Pressure creates better coverage. You get a huge stop from Juan Thornhill here on the goal line to force a field goal, and then you just start to see the Browns start to pick it up, right? Amari Cooper is a massive asset to this team, and it just boggles me whenever people like downplay what Amari Cooper has been able to accomplish as a Cleveland Brown and at this point of his career. Like, he's playing the best football of his life right now. And he was such a huge part to why the Browns were able to win games. And the fact that people think he's overrated is silly to me. And honestly, like, that's my national media litmus test. When somebody nationally tells me that like Amari Cooper is overrated or that Amari Cooper's production last year wasn't that valuable to the team, like whenever I hear that from somebody who claims to cover all 32 teams or something like that, that's when I know they don't know what they're talking about when it comes to this team, because Amari Cooper was such a huge part of this team. Like, this team does not win 11 games or make the playoffs if Amari Cooper is not healthy for this year. So for people to act like that's not the case, it just tells me you didn't watch, because it's so obvious when you rewatch the season that Amari Cooper was such a big part of what this team was able to do and accomplish. Kevin Stefanski was in his bag on this one, play calling wise. I thought he had a really good day as a play caller. This is one of his best play calls. And then late in the second quarter, the weather starts to become a factor. This forces like a Brock Purdy fumble. It doesn't get picked up by the Cleveland Browns, but it does force a super long third down attempt, which also pushes San Francisco out of field goal range. And then you compound that because the Browns went like 3 and out on their next drive. There's like 40 seconds left and San Francisco has 3 timeouts. And the Browns get off a great punt here by Bojo, who kind of kills any hopes of San Francisco getting an extra possession. Another key play in this game that doesn't really feel like a key play, but just not allowing San Francisco to go 2 for 1 there at the end of the half is huge. Absolutely just a huge play there by the punter. All right, the Browns defense had some great moments, but I think like this third quarter stretch, I'm just going to try to play all of these plays on a loop here that they came out in the third quarter with. They were insane in the third. They were the best defense on earth in the third quarter of this game. Just insane defensive effort, pressure, resetting the line of scrimmage. And then I think it leads to an interception at one point. It is one of the more impressive quarters of defensive football you will ever watch. Hats off to the 49ers, who I thought played well defensively too in this third quarter. But the Browns defense was just absurd in this third quarter. I think Brock Purdy might have had like 10 yards passing in this quarter, if that. I think I'm giving him way too many passing. I think he had like 2 or -2 or something like that. It was dominance from this defense in the third quarter. And look, if this is just a glimpse of who they can be in big time situations, boy, this defense has a lot ahead of it as far as accomplishments go, if that's the case. But yeah, the Browns defensive line just straight up dominated in the second half. Unfortunately, offensively, the Browns aren't really dominating. They got a field goal in the third quarter. And then they also get another PJ Walker interception on what is supposed to be like a 50-50 ball to Amari Cooper. Really ill-advised here. Leads to an interception, which leads to a touchdown, which add that to the points created off turnover list. But after this turnover, I think the Browns offense starts to show a little life here. I think they start to come back and kind of fight back in this game. They get an absolutely massive fourth down throw here from PJ Walker. I thought he had a really nice throw to Amari Cooper here as well. And that leads to a field goal. Just somebody I want to bring up real quick in this recap before I get lost in all the sauce. Obo Okoronkwo. Now, Dalvin Tomlinson had a great game in this one, but I feel like I brought up Obo Okoronkwo at least 3 times in this rewatch. We've looked at 5 games. Very underrated player. Let's keep an eye on that for next season. But Obo had a pretty damn good season last year. And that's something to keep an eye on, because if he can be a productive piece off the bench for this Browns team, I think that means a ton. And let's look at this last scoring drive. Again, it's interesting to watch this last scoring drive because the Browns made a ton of mistakes. And they got lucky here in the last drive. Now, they got unlucky because since they had a backup quarterback in, since Deshaun Watson wasn't healthy, there are a couple of throws that would have been huge plays that I'm pretty confident Deshaun Watson makes that don't get completed because he's not in the game. But you are lucky because you're able to come back from that despite not having your starting quarterback in, because the 49ers give you about 30 yards of personal foul penalties in this drive, which ends up being pivotal to your success because this leads to a scoring drive. One of those penalties, very questionable. It was a late hit on Elijah Moore. It wasn't a penalty. If this is the UFL and you can review any play, probably gets overturned. So you lucked out there. The second penalty was a penalty, but that first one, not really a penalty there. But they got bailed out for sure on this one. But Jerome Ford really showed up after those penalties and started to make sure that the Browns were in really good position to make a field goal to go ahead at the very late part of this game. And I'll continue to say it. Jerome Ford, I understand why people don't want him out there as the feature every down back because he's just not one. But I think a lot of people are asleep on his ability to be a pretty good secondary back. And he shows it in these games when you watch him, man. He has big run after big run. It's just you can't rely on him on first down. So that's what I'll say on Jerome Ford here. I think Jerome Ford kind of gets slept on a ton here. Again, it depends on what you expect out of him, but I think Jerome Ford deserves a little bit more respect than what he gets. All right, and then you have the final defensive drive. Martin Emerson has a bad couple of plays where he helps put San Francisco in position. Martin Emerson, I don't think he started out the season as strong as I remembered him starting out the season. I think he had a good game versus Cincinnati, but a little bit up and down. I'm pretty sure he bounces back and has a strong end of the season, but really struggled in this game and the Tennessee game. San Francisco misses the field goal, and this game ends up being a massive turning point in this Cleveland Browns season, because I think this win right here gives this team the confidence to feel like no matter who we have on the field, they can beat anybody. And if they don't have that in their back pocket, I really wonder if this team is able to kind of have the mental fortitude to do what they did that season, despite the fact that they would go through way more injuries after this point. So I think this was a turning point. Like, if they don't win this game, I don't think they have the confidence going forward to think that they can have the audacity to accomplish what they did, which is win 11 games with 26% of the salary cap on injured reserve. But that's the recap and rewatch for week 6. Join me next Sunday for week 7's rewatch. It's been a fun series. I hope you guys have been enjoying it as much as I have. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.